Welcome to Bleach Revisited. This is Carker Gold. As always, in this series, we'll be reading through a chapter of Bleach, analyzing and discussing the chapter, giving a little bit of a response to it, and then talking about how it connects to the rest of the manga. So that any of that interests you, if you're, a fan of Bleach or just getting into it, you're in the right place. But without further ado, let us begin with chapter 21 of the Bleach manga. Chapter 21, June 17th, OP5. A Fighting Boy. Neither, Sonny. What the? Bleach. Chapter 21, June 17th, OP5. A Fighting Boy. I get stylized here. A boy fighting, maybe, but... He's too heavy, Rukia. Rukia! Ow! What are they? Rukia, it's Ichigo, look! What the? What are you? Incredible. You actually saw me and lived. What are you? You're lucky. Ugh. What is that? But your luck's run out, Sonny. You've seen me twice. I have to eat your soul. What is this? That girl is a part of you? Grand Fisher. That's his code name. The bait decoy that sprouts from his head disguises itself as a person. When someone sees it, well, he only goes after those with especially strong spiritual energy and absorbs their power. He's managed to outwit and outfight Soul Reapers for 54 years. That's him, all right. A well-known lowlife. Here's his record from the Soul Society's database. He's a real piece of work. You're hurting my feelings, girl. What a day. So many who can see me. A regular feast. Then, the girl I tried to save was his decoy? Which means I fell for his trap. Delicious, delicious. 3, 2, 1. Then Mom was, what to do? Will it all fit in my belly? Ichigo! Ah! No! That was reckless, idiot! So young! Sonny! Ichigo! Disintegrate Rondani's black dog! Read through, burn away, claw out your throat! Rukia, no! Ichigo! Rukia, stay out of this one. This monster's mine. You take Kon and take care of Yuzu and Karen, okay? Are you insane? He's too strong. He's beaten us for over 50 years. Just go, please. Stay out of it. This one is personal. Rukia? What is it? What? Alright, and that is it for Bleach Chapter 21. That one, felt a little bit quicker than the last one, right? I mean, also, we finished this in 5 minutes. I think that's a new record for a read, so pretty quick, but a lot of action going on. Some confrontational dialogue, but yeah, let's get right into kind of what's going on in this chapter, the analysis, the response. Again, as always, I'll be talking about what's happening both visually as well as narratively. And if I bring up anything that you hadn't noticed before that's like new to you that you didn't recognize on the read through, feel free to give the video a like to kind of show that I've imparted something upon you. But if you notice something that I don't, please put it in the comments. Please let me know. You're free not to like the video in that case, because or well, I say in the case that you've noticed all of this, right? I think that's only fair. But I'm trying to kind of put people onto things that they might not recognize, right? To kind of put a new kind of fresh take on a lot of this. But yeah, so here we have getting right into the analysis though. We start off with as we found out, Grand Fisher is its name, right? This the decoy. So this entity that we thought was a spiritual kind of entity all along, we get more and more connecting it to, and we have visually in the last two chapters, but I didn't want to spoil the reveal for you, right? This is not the spoiler section, so I just kind of hinted at like this connection and all of that, but we get a lot of this kind of grotesquerie of this character where we have a lot of these very close-up shots. We get the clearly different kind of like eye there. I feel as though like the white of its eyes, like the way that its eyes are shaped as well as the white of its eyes, maybe you're meant to link it more towards this hollow than being any sort of human presence. But again, like the really intense focus on like the details of the mouth and the teeth, which of course, obviously, hollows are already pretty teeth prominent. They devour souls, right? But the kind of even more grotesque thing here, the thing that I'm talking about is that, clearly we see throughout this chapter that it shulks this little body, this form, and so we're just getting parts of it while we get the sense that something more dreadful is sort of happening, especially as the hair kind of falls over, because it's like this smaller bob of hair, but here we see the hair kind of collapsing over the mantle that it's wearing. Also, Grand Fisher referring to Ichigo as Sonny, or like this kind of diminutive, like, child, right? It's, I think, again, meant to emphasize this sort of, like, this entity that even though Ichigo is like learning all this stuff and becoming a competent Soul Reaper, now we have these kind of elder sort of threats. This, as Rukia said, has been around for 54 years or whatever, right? So we have this pretty intense antagonistic force that has been around a lot longer than our protagonist. So it's not just like a newly made hollow like a lot of the ones that we've been fighting so far in the series. But I like the way that this is essentially one big square panel, but split into three different sections. And I think it kind of interestingly split in a lot of those same sort of ways that we're getting this bobber, this sort of spiritual doll split. So this bifurcation of the image really kind of helps to draw at least this subconscious parallel of this entity kind of breaking itself apart. And clearly Ichigo is kind of disgusted or unnerved maybe by it. Get a big manly Ichigo. Fighting boy. It's easy to forget with like a lot of these designs, especially as we get later in the series, that Ichigo is like 15. Right? It's not very old. But a shonen protagonist, right? You get a lot of kids that are younger than 15 reading this like, oh yeah, I can't wait till I'm cool and 15. Anyway, I'd said earlier, that like she brought Khan to put the spirit into, the mod soul into his body, but here she's just carrying Ichigo's body. So clearly she must have used the glove or some other means of evacuating his spirit, right? Which is curious because I think ultimately, like I think the omake is maybe supposed to indicate that that's what she's going to eventually do, but it's I would wonder, I would imagine that like the whole point of bringing Khan was to use him that way. But here he is, we've got him getting smushed by Ichigo as she's carrying, uh, and Yuzu and Karen have been put aside. I guess Grand Fisher gave Ichigo at least the time to do that, but he must have rushed forward maybe faster than Rukia did. And again, we get that kind of like, especially Ichigo being troubled by something, and I love that we don't like the panel cuts right, so that we don't get to see it. Again, we get that refrain of like this unseen enemy, and also, of course, that Ichigo saw it and lived, right? And then finally, we get this kind of this bifurcation of its head, this final reveal that, yeah, this isn't just a regular spiritual entity. Obviously, it's something else. It's something monstrous. And again, whenever I speak towards like those sorts of unseen enemies or those grotesqueries, obviously, talking about like these kind of things that might wear a human face but are actually more monster than person, right? And like this kind of sloughing of the human form as the true kind of monster makes itself known. Yeah, I mean it's the sort of, again, talking about the unknown enemy, the enemy you can't perceive. Very much might be one that you can see, but you don't comprehend like what's truly kind of happening there, right? You just see like the mask that it puts on. And Bleach is certainly, if anything, a series about people and the way that they mask themselves, right? Especially in relation to others. So we're going to see that a lot thematically, because Ichigo, even though he's pretty honest and earnest about his bonds, he still puts on a mask, right? He still kind of shows a different face to the world, um, especially whenever he's kind of whenever it comes closer to his mother's death, right? That's like what Orihime noticed. Like, that's not Ichigo being honest, right? Whenever he's like smiling and everything. But I think whenever Ichigo is kind of being dishonest, it's like a dishonesty to try to put others at ease, to really not like let them know how much he's suffering. It's ultimately to kind of protect them. It's the same sort of dishonesty that Orihime practiced, right? Where she didn't want to share like her grief, or just wallow in misery. She wanted to kind of put on a happy face and celebrate the things that she enjoyed, even if it wasn't completely honest with her brother. And like she didn't realize that like that was causing him suffering. Uh, so like there's this sense of like kind of a nobler maybe means of dishonesty, or of masking your true self or what you're actually feeling. I mean, in society we do that all the time. I mean, that's entirely how we assemble ourselves, is that we are just a series of putting on these different like kind of more or less performances, or these masks. Like if you go in public, if you're really like really like upset about something and you've got to go to work, you can't just be at work like crying all the time, or at school. Well, like that's going to distract from your courses or whatever, right? Um, like you have to put on a face and approach the world in that way. And so while Ichigo and his friends so far have kind of put on these different faces to kind of try to protect others in a way, or to kind of not upset them, we're going to see also on the flip side this sort of thing where antagonists are literally, if not figuratively, putting on a face to deceive others for the intention of actually, where their intentions are ill, and they use that face to keep others from realizing that things are more serious. So I think it's interesting that Bleach kind of comments a little bit on that. That it focuses a little bit on the different masks people use, and the ways that those kind of masks can be used. I don't think it ever, it's easy to be like, oh, well, it's this versus that, and I think it's much more shades of gray, because we certainly have, like for instance, Rukia, right, where there's clearly a lot of stuff that she's not telling Ichigo. Like, he's only getting information as it becomes prevalent, but I think a lot of ways that's to kind of protect him, right? We got that earlier with Acid Wire, Orihime's brother become Hollow. Rukia didn't want to tell Ichigo, all this stuff about Hollows being humans, because, that's like, him knowing that they're human spirits only adds an angle of suffering, really. Like, maybe, like, even though, like, you could tell yourself you're doing everything right by cleansing their sins as a Hollow and helping them move on and move from this tortured sort of existence, you're still fighting people's souls at the end of the day, and so it's easy to kind of get conflicted whenever that's the case. So yeah, whenever I say it's not all black and white, it's not like this ideology versus this other one. I think it's, the ways in which this ideology gets meted out. I don't think ever do we have a character that is, I say I don't think ever. We do have some characters that are completely genuine, that like don't kind of hide their intentions, but that's incredibly rare in Bleach. A lot of the times, characters are going to hide their power or hide their intentions or hide their true feelings, if not to protect somebody else, to continue to exist within society the way that they do. You'll see a lot of that, like a lot of people kind of hiding who they are masking a facet of themselves, or their power, or something, in order to continue to kind of live the existence they want to live, without this sort of conflict. And I mean, for antagonists, that's like, obviously they don't want the gig to be up before they can strike their master stroke or kill whoever they want to kill. And so that's how Grand Fishers existed for, this many years, right? That it's this deceitful kind of creature, that it lures those in, and then is able to kind of, through this effective sort of quite literal masking, obviously, you know, we can see how that deception kind of takes place. So it's interesting to see that theme conveyed pretty explicitly visually here. And we'll get that as the series goes on, of course. Like I said, it's a major theme of Bleach, and it's been kind of less prevalent up to this point, but now that we have this major antagonist, of course the major antagonist is going to take a lot of, if effective, so again, talking about kind of narrative and writing an effective story, when we talk about the themes of a story, the sort of core kind of, ideologies that are present, and how they're being kind of progressed, and how the characters represent these different things, right? These different thoughts, these different ideals, whether or not it's meant to kind of tell you any sort of lesson. I think that's one thing that's kind of easy to conflate whenever you're learning a lot of this stuff early, is like, oh, it's the moral of the story, right? It's the lesson we're meant to learn. And I think that's like, I don't think that stories are meant to teach you a lesson. I think certainly some are written for that purpose, but instead I feel like stories are a way to package all of this kind of information, that if you just told somebody, it would be less significant, right? So if I just told you, hey, yeah, people trick people all the time, or people always put on a mask to kind of cover up who, how they might really be feeling, and they can use that in different ways. That's not nearly as interesting as, all right, here's this guy and he fights fucking spirits, all right? It's, you create entertainment out of, these bigger ideas, right? Out of these kind of more prevalent sort of, you can say whether or not they're truths or not, but at the very least, effective themes will kind of be something that people can identify and resonate with to a degree, or see some amount of truth within. Um, but I don't think themes are meant to be like, oh, the lesson, like this is what Bleach tells us about something. This is what Bleach reveals about the world. Because yeah, to a degree, a lot of this is true stuff. Like a lot of kind of this idea of mask, and of the identity, and how we think about ourselves, and how we present ourselves, especially under the pressures of society. A lot of that certainly rings true, but I don't think, Bleach isn't. It's using those to, not to the end of like, hey, see, you learned that. I think it's just using that to create an entertaining narrative, right? Um, so whenever I bring up those points, it's just to kind of talk about how that narrative is constructed, to kind of enrich in what's being given to us visually, to give it sort of a through line narratively, so that we can kind of build upon these ideas and how they antagonize what our protagonists stand for, right? Um, and so, ultimately, what I'm trying to kind of get at here is that you want your antagonist, especially, to be thematically appropriate antagonists. So whenever I would talk about, like, Bleach has this kind of theme of, characters having these, the importance of these bonds between characters, right? And the importance of, how characters, how much they share and how they operate within a society, how they decide to present themselves. So you want antagonists that all speak towards a different facet of that is antagonistic. At the very least, I say you want that. I mean, they're usually more cathartic and more fulfilling if they do, because they feel like they're more a part of everything going on within this. They don't feel like, oh, this guy's just out of nowhere. Okay, And if you think about like some of your favorite antagonists for stuff, you're going to find that a lot of your favorite antagonists tend to be really tied up in those larger narrative kind of elements, rather than just being a random dude that has nothing to do with it. Unless, of course, the narrative is about like how random forces will come out of nowhere and mess with you, but then that's connected, right? So it's interesting to think about, but certainly, whenever you think about a lot of the themes of Bleach, that's why a lot of the major antagonists are going to be thematically resonant, and I'll try to highlight that as we go along. But here we could see how much Grand Fisher is connected to all of the tissue of Bleach that we've been reading so far. So this is a great moment, I think, thematically, for really delivering on everything that Kubotite's been building over the last 20 chapters before this, right? And absolute, like, you can really tell here that like the body horror is on full display as this skin sort of gets shucked to the side, and this tentacle flickers out of its head, and it's still got like this skin kind of like on it, but like it completely splits down the sides and falls off to like a little skirt at the end of this fishing bobber. And of course, this is ergo the name Grand Fisher, right? And it has a lure that it uses. Um, yeah, and of course we get, and it's got this huge smile, this kind of rictus sort of grin, even this this dead sort of twisted, permanent smile, and I think that certainly that's supposed to kind of again feed into a little bit because of the twisted nature of this character. Overall, whenever it comes to Grand Fisher's design, I don't think like there's part of it that I like a lot, and there's part of it that I don't. Like, I do think he looks kind of like goofy as hell right here, right? With like the bobber sticking out of his head and this big furry sort of mass. But like as we see him, get animated and have these like all this other stuff come out of him, and like these tentacles kind of come out of its mask, and choking people, and the way that it could extend its limbs. I think that ends up being much more effective for me. But here we finally get our first like full shot of Grand Fisher as he truly is, and it's this kind of mammoth creature, literally and figuratively, with how hairy it is, I suppose. Uh, but this entity that I think in a lot of ways has these hidden sort of threat to him, like all these things that are hidden behind its mask that it can send out, as well as the way that it's got like this big shaggy body, but it can kind of projectile its limbs from itself, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of interesting that way. Um, but yeah, and then it's unclear if he's still speaking from that like the skin that's like held that way. It's great stuff. And clearly, so we get brought up the idea of Grant Fisher being like this very serious antagonist, right? As Rukia explains everything and pulls out the rap sheet for its crimes. So this one's going to be worth a pretty good bonus, right? Like, because that was the idea, is that the bonus pay, I guess, that they get as Soul Reapers uh, clearly depends on how much of a nuisance these things are. But yeah, here we also get. I think this is the first time that we really get explicitly that through consuming those with strong spiritual energy, they absorb their powers. So Grand Fisher maybe was weaker at some points, but over all these years has really started consuming stronger and stronger spirits, absorbing their power and becoming, you know, stronger himself. And so I like this, outwit our outfight, that he's powerful, but also really, really capable as an intellectual sort of deceptive force, even. And again, that's the sort of thing that we'll get a lot as we go through Bleach, where Ichigo really is, pushing for like these kind of this. He's very honest in the way that he approaches conflict, and so of course having antagonists, they're dishonest in the way that they approach conflict, but also capable of putting up a fight, really provides for the sort of antagonist that we're going to see a lot as like true threats in Bleach, right? So yeah, well-known low life. Um, and again, that the diminutive of him referring to Rukia as girl and Ichigo as Sunny, we really get this sense of Grant Fisher as being this kind of much older sort of entity than them. And yeah, again, I love this. So we finally get Grant Fisher's teeth as it opens its mouth. I don't think we've really seen them before. I mean, obviously we saw them on the bobber, but I love this like close up, especially of like the lips and the teeth, really mirroring the little spirits' lips and teeth. I think is super effective at like taking what was already kind of a little bit of a grotesque imagery and really tying it, not so discreetly to this monster, right? That it's true monstrous kind of nature that it's trying. It's all about devouring these souls. And of course, Ichigo puts it all together here too. I love the inner cut of him realizing, the significance of all of this, which we knew. I mean, we figured out well beforehand, right? All the things were there, but here Ichigo is finally catching up to where we are, and so all that's left is this confrontation. And I love that Ichigo immediately goes for the face because we talked about before, he often just tries to disable his enemies, but here he's going for this kind of big slash overhead, two-handed kind of swing. Rukia is telling him not to, obviously, because he's kind of throwing himself right at the enemy. And I think really kind of effectively we get this big slash, and then next panel, the payoff of that just dragging into the dirt, and then Grant Fisher's the one in the air, and Rukia is extolling, or I guess expressing that Ichigo is being reckless, right? I love this. This is a great visual for like the Grand Fisher's hair, like whipping around its arm, forming a new one, and it just like kicking out of there. And then he extends it out towards Ichigo, which is, I love it extending down, like kind of down and left. And then as we come to this page, we have Ichigo coming this way, but so much of the action is like this antagonistic, like left to right extended arm action, building like what we expect. Okay, well, what's going to happen? And maybe Ichigo's going to cut the arm off again, but all he can get to is kind of putting his blade out and kind of skidding against this arm as it catches him that way. Like that he kicks it up into the air and it gets all wobbly. And then he leaps to kind of go and confront Grand Fisher in the air, and Grand Fisher, like his fur just splits into this mass Uh, so we get the sense that this is like a hollow with a lot of different kinds of abilities, right? We've seen it's got deception, it's got regeneration, it's got like extendy arms. It's got this amorphous mass. Um, it's got tentacles. It shoots its hair all down, and like I love this again. Whenever we talk about like these kind of the ways that action is drawn, a lot of the times this antagonistic force is going to be a left to right force because we usually read right to left, and so it's going against our reading expectations, kind of forcing us back from our natural inclination to read from right to left, where we completely like that's the way we would read manga at least. So instead of Ichigo having a sort of forward force to him, he's being slapped back against the corners of this panel again by like this huge mass of hair. Rodon Ninis. I don't know that that's a reference to anybody. I was gonna say like Rodon, right? Rondon. I don't know. I guess it's Rodin is the famous artist, right? The Gates of Hell. But I guess this is Rondani's Rodani's Black Dog, which if that's a reference that you get, let me know. But not any characters that are present at all here. I think this is just a typical chant. This sort of disintegrate, burn away, read through, claw your throat. I think all speaks towards this kind of hado that she's starting to perform. And Ichigo, despite being completely kind of overwhelmed here, is telling Ruki to back off as he cuts through the hair. And he falls like down this kind of cliff, or I guess down cliff, down to where Ruki is. It's kind of hard to tell here with the way that this is framed, but she runs over to him, and I like that he's insisting upon, like this being his battle, right? That's very important for Ichigo. And again, I think this is effective, kind of setting up like Rukia being really kind of intensely involved here as we get this triple shot of her as we're getting closer and closer to the zoom onto her expression, as Ichigo again facing away is telling her to stay out of this one, right? That this is his fight, all of that, and then we get this pretty much nearly full page Ichigo determination as he keep going back as he insists on this being kind of a personal struggle, this personal battle. So that's it's a cool shot, cool panel of Ichigo. And of course, we get the Grand Fisher there. Kind of, I love, so like, whenever I talk about like its design as a mix for me, like, whenever you just see it standing there, I think it looks kind of goofy. But here, whenever it's so large, it doesn't even fit in panel, and its hair is kind of flowing as if it were underwater. It's got this kind of, it can control this mass of itself. I think that's much more sort of imposing and maybe kind of terrifying in a way. And then, what I had assumed is this is finally Rukia pulling Khan out to put the Mod Soul into, I guess, Ichigo's body. Which is weird. I guess she must have put the soul in Ichigo's... No, I guess she could use the glove, right? Because I'm trying to wonder how Ichigo got out of his body. So, I was like, oh, did she put the soul in Ichigo's body and then fish it out of his mouth and put it back into... like back into Khan, but I think she must have just used a glove or some other implement, right? I don't know. I don't know that it's possible that Ichigo is capable of casting off his body and just like shedding it to go, soul form. I don't know if that's something that's, even capable at this point, or if it's something that Rukia always has to do. It's, it's a little loosey. I mean, it would make sense if that's something that Ichigo eventually learned to do on his own, but I mean, the whole point of having Khan around is to have that cover for whenever he's, in Soul Reaver form. So, I assume that this is what that's kind of speaking towards. But that's it for chapter 21 of Bleach. All in all, I like this chapter a lot, obviously. I think all the action in it is, like, fantastic. especially like the layering of like the sound effects and this tentacle shooting up out of it, the way that a lot of this action lines is used, or are used. Just a lot of the depiction of this enemy really sells him as a threat. Yeah, it's a good chapter. I think it's really a good chapter for not just establishing Grand Fisher as a threat, not just having Rukia be like, "Oh, he's a problem," but like we get to clearly see his abilities in large use. We get to see a lot of this connection that he has, as terms of like antagonistic towards Ichigo and towards a lot of these kind of larger kind of thematic things that Ichigo stands for. Um, and yeah, we do get a little bit of a cool fight here too, and also we get a little bit more of Ichigo kind of trying to shoulder more of this himself, right? That he doesn't want Rukia involved in the fight, but like that this is his fight to go and do, right? So we get a little bit of that, like maybe it's not pragmatic, but it's this sort of like sense of maybe I don't know, like justice or something, right? So like this sense that Ichigo, this is the threat that he has to take care of, and he says it's personal, of course, because it is. So maybe there's like some vengeance there too, or some sort of I don't know, whatever you would call it, but certainly we see that Ichigo feels like he wouldn't be like that. Like this is something for him to take care of. That Rukia can't be involved, which is kind of wild because of course we know like this thing's killed a lot of people, a lot of Soul Reapers. So if anything, Rukia does have this sort of some level of connection, right? Maybe it's not as personal, but still, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's it for the chapter. Right? Like I said, I like it a lot, but I like Bleach, so go blame me. I think this is probably visually one of my favorite chapters so far. Just and like all like the little like stuff that Kubo's doing with this character, like the little fake, like the decoy that Fisher uses, as well as displaying his powers, and Ichigo kind of fighting against it. I think it's all super effective. Anywho, let's get right into spoilers. Let's talk about how this connects to Bleach at large. There are a few connections that I want to draw. Um, not a ton, a few. I'll try to be kind of quick about it. Certainly, like good forward, hunky Ichigo, whatever. He's 15. No simping here. You could simp for Rukia, That's the thing. It's like everybody is like, oh man, Orihime is so hot, right? It's a waifu Orihime, but like Rukia is 150. You're not a pedophile then. uh, this. So I think the big thing, obviously, the biggest one to speak towards is this face splitting in half moment, which of course I stopped and talked about this a lot in the analysis, but obviously gets repeated with both kind of Aizen and Tosin, right? But never again, which is cute. Uh, but especially with Aizen, whenever he turns into his final form and his skin kind of splits across his face. With Tosin, he just becomes kind of more monstrous, but he also has that sort of what I affectionately, I guess, call dickhead Tosin. The one where he's got like the full mask and it's kind of split down the middle to a degree. It looks pretty phallic. But so does this, right? This is certainly kind of a phallic sort of image as well. But yeah, I mean the sort of schemer shucking its fucking false human skin as it reveals its true self. I mean, Aizen does that entire sort of grotesque imagery of the skin kind of flapped and folded back. It's repeated with Aizen, and I think effectively there as well. We get a little bit of that with Yuha, like where he grows all these different eyes, right? And has like the fucked up eyes, but it's never like this very clear visual parallel of like splitting its face and skin down the middle to reveal its true self now that it's ready to do an outright fight and feels like it's deceit. Ooh, excuse me. Deceit's no longer necessary. Um, but yeah. I wonder how many people, because that's not something I ever hear. You know, people talk a lot about like, oh man, isn't it crazy whenever Eisen goes into like his, you know, what is it like? It's got some crazy name. You know, not butterflies in, but the last one where he's got the pitch black face and he has like the crazy hand arms. Um, it's like something Hogger. I want to say Nidhogger, but that's not it. It's something crazier, something more intense. But yeah, you know, big messed up Monster Eyes, and I hear people talk about that, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody draw that connection to Grand Fisher and how Grand Fisher does the same sort of thing. Like that skin shucking, because it's easy to remember Grand Fisher's Bobber obviously taking on Masaki's form, taking on that other form, um, but not so much the skin splittiness of it. And that might be due to the fact a lot of people were just watching the anime, and I think the anime certainly plays down the grotesquerie of this. Uh, so yeah. If you saw the Bleach live action movie, which I will take a moment, like a beat here, beat. I say beat because there's the Bleach Beat Collection CDs. Jeez, this is a tangential tangent. Anyway, rolling back. If you haven't seen the Bleach live action movie, do yourself a favor and go ahead and do it. I think it's actually a pretty good, like the Netflix one. Obviously, it's got Japanese actors and a Japanese director. I might, do a review of it for this channel at some point. But I think it more than anything, and this is the reason why I say watch it. Don't just go look up screenshots. I think it did a really good job of depicting Grand Fisher. I mean, obviously, it's kind of not the greatest CGI, whatever, but just like as this sort of writhing mass of hair and sort of tentacliness and all of that. Yeah, I don't know. I think Grand Fisher was pretty effectively rendered in that film. But that movie does a lot of good things. That movie gets a lot right. I think like what it sort of missteps on. I think the biggest misstep the movie really makes for me, because I'm pretty happy with most of it. Um, but the biggest issue I have with it maybe is that they didn't get Shiro Sagisu's soundtrack. So being such a big fan of the anime, especially the first couple seasons, that soundtrack is so core to the identity of Bleach. But instead they have, instead of just going off with like a different kind of soundtrack entirely, they have this weird copycat soundtrack. Uh, and it's just like, it feels like Uncanny Valley but noise. It's like you kind of recognize it, but it's not quite there, and it's unsettling, but like not in a satisfactory unsettling, just like a this is wrong sort of unsettling. Um, the biggest derivation, of course, being whenever we get like the theme instead of number one, we get this other theme about drinking milk. It's weird. It's a weird time. But what I do mention is that I think Grand Fisher, like I say, I think he looks kind of goofy here and maybe less intimidating to a degree. He's just certainly an interesting design and different, but I think the movie does a pretty good job selling his sort of design. But I think Kubo really likes these sort of hairy monster designs. We'll see this again a couple times in Hollow designs, the way that fur gets implemented. And ultimately, I think the latest of which we get with Nozarashi, right, where one of the Hollow kind of aspects of Nozarashi, that's Yachiro's release, which is really Kenpachi's to an extent. Anyway, is like this like really skeletal entity, and the other one's like this really fuzzy one. Um, but I think that shows the kind of different bestial sort of forms that hollows can take, and I think that's the other thing that's kind of maybe on display here. Maybe I'll talk about that in like the analysis for the next chapter. I don't know. Is this linking of hollows to different actual like bestial sort of designs? So we've got like the Askwire is a snake. We've got that insect thing, but here with Grand Fisher especially being like this kind of this large sort of ape like this hairy sort of hunched over gorilla simian monkey thing. Um, Maybe that speaks towards it being maybe closer to a human design, which I don't know if that's significant, but Yeah. Boo, 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 boo. Otherwise, I don't know that there's a lot of other bits kind of connected here that I really want to kind of draw. Obviously, Ichigo doing the big overhead slash that he does. This is like, looking at this now, it's hard not to imagine Ichigo being like Getsuga Tensho. Like, especially the way this slash comes down. It's such a Getsuga sort of moment. Uh, but no. It's just him attacking. But I like that already. Those kind of movements are sort of that sort of big downward slash, right? That's sort of becoming an iconic kind of movement for Ichigo, and so certainly, I think that's part of why it gets used for the kind of the motion of doing the Getsuga uh, as a sort of large finishing strike. Yeah. I think another kind of parallel that I wanted to draw. I mean, other than regeneration, obviously. So I was talking about like, okay, so now we have this super strong thing that's shed its deceitful form, and it can regenerate from its wounds and attack you, and it's very strong. Just like how Aizen can regenerate from his wounds and attack you, and he's very strong and has been a menace for all these years. Uh, you know, I like also this scene especially, my god, reminds me of whenever Gin shows up and he shoots his Shikai at Ichigo at the gates for the Seirute, right? Um, the Rukon gates or whatever they are, and Ichigo kind of skinningly blocks it. Here he does this kind of, he gets knocked back and he kicks the leg or the arm up out of the way, but that same sort of Ichigo kind of, this thing shooting across the screen at Ichigo and him going to block with his sword. It's cool that we get that moment revisited with Gen, but yeah, kind of neat. Neat seeing Ichigo kind of using his weapon as a defensive, and that certainly being something that we see later as well. Yeah, I don't know that I can call any of these other sort of things. I think certainly as a moment of growth, Ichigo being like, this one's personal and insisting on this being his own fight. Certainly, I think Ichigo kind of grows from that, right? And that, especially in the final battle against Yawak, he takes Orihime up there with him, right? He takes his whole cadre of friends. Um, I would have liked if Chad got to do more than fight some statues off screen, reduced to Ganju status. But you can't win them all. Uh, yeah, this is how it is. But I like that. This is something that Ichigo kind of grows from, this idea that he has to shoulder these battles alone. Now we might not get that growth until really like after the whole Hueco Mundo arc, because I'm pretty sure he's still doing that same sort of thing with Grimmjow and especially with Ukiura to an extent. So I don't know. It's yeah, how much he's like, step aside, let me handle it, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's it for the chapter as far as larger connections go. Like I said, don't have a lot of things to talk about. Mostly just how these sort of events kind of get paralleled later, obviously. Um, Especially Grand Fisher to Aizen. I think there's like a pretty clear 1-to-1 for a lot of the visuals there, and even like the powers and the fight progression in a lot of ways. Yeah, yeah, Now, of course, Ichigo doesn't awaken any new power to slay him. I think the way that this fight ends is certainly different, definitely different than the way that the Aizen fight ends. But that's the whole point, right? You reuse these structures, but to different ends. Um, not just literally a different end, but also figuratively what you're doing with it. The outcome significance is different too. But yeah, that's it for this episode of Bleach Revisited. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for getting all the way through it. I really appreciate your viewership and patronage. As always, if you want to take it one level further, you can always like and comment and subscribe on the video. Any sort of engagement with the video will help put this in front of more fans of Bleach. I've also got a Twitter that you can follow along with, and a Patreon that you can support at any amount that you feel comfortable with. But that's it for this one, folks. This has been Karakura Gold with Bleach Revisited. As always, spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.